Today, I interviewed JM Ryerson. He is the owner of a company called Let's Go Win, and he's on a mission to help people mind, body, and spirit heal themselves and be the best leaders that they can be. Real Money has gone on a journey over the last couple of years and primarily focused on women and women guests. And here's what I've realized. In order for our world to work, in order for our world to win, we get to have men a part of this conversation. It no longer serves us to be man versus woman when it comes to money, success, power. As a community, a global community, this is the time for us to work together. And Lynn Twist says it best. I'm going to read this from her most recent book. She says, there's a prophecy from the Baha'i people. They say that the bird of humanity has two great wings, a male wing and a female wing. The bird of humanity has had its male wing extended, and fully expressed for centuries, while the female wing in the bird of humanity has been somewhat folded in and not yet fully expressed. So the male wing, in order to keep the bird of humanity afloat, has become overdeveloped, overmuscular, and in fact has had to become violent. So the bird of humanity is flying in circles and has been for several hundred years. And at the first century of the third millennium, that's where we are, first century, third millennium, we're only 22 years into that. The prophecy says the feminine wing, the female wing in all of us, in women and men, will fully express itself in this 100-year cycle. The male wing in all of us can relax a little bit. And the bird of humanity, instead of flying in circles, will soar. Today, I have a conversation with JM about soaring, winning together, financially and otherwise. You don't want to miss it. So starting with the front end of your story, JM, does JM stand for anything?
James Michael. Yeah. But I was a slow child, so they just gave me two initials. They're like, here, man, this is all you got.
That's it. I like it. Okay. You grew up in Montana. What part of Montana?
I grew up in a place called Great Falls, Montana, which is north central Montana. And I graduated college from Missoula, which would be on the west side of the state. So I'm a West Coast kid who recently has, relocated to Florida like 3 years ago.
Okay. Got it. You've ran 3 successful companies. Is this your third iteration?
This is number 4. This is a different animal. This is the legacy company is what I call this one. I don't find myself having any interest in ever letting this one go. In fact, you and I were talking off air about our sons, and I would love for my sons to want to run this company. But to answer your question, yeah, I ran 3 companies in the financial service world over 20 years.
Nice. Okay. I didn't know that you have a financial background, so this is going to make the conversation even more fun.
Well, just so there's not high expectations, I'm not very good at financial services in terms of I built teams and leadership. It happened to be in financial services. So I know enough to be dangerous when it comes to that. But yeah, I guess I know a little bit about it. Let's
be clear though. So financial services can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. So in what sector of finance were you in?
Yeah. So I started in the life insurance world is where I really began, morphed into life insurance annuities. Towards the end, we were doing the full gamut of, investments, and SEC got in our world and all that fun stuff. So, but primarily I was like the liaison to a lot of the CEOs and the executives at the insurance companies, was my primary responsibility alongside of building the distribution.
I got it. Okay. And I love what you're up to today. You're, in my words, not yours. And if you want to find JM, you can go to his website. It's letsgowin.com, right?
It is. Mm-hmm.
And learn about him and his story. What impressed me so much, though, is that right off the bat, as soon as you jump on your website, you talk about the not so good stuff about business and running businesses. And you were running a 7-figure business. You were making 7 figures nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, business is it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? It's anybody says that it is, kind of like we were talking about marriage off air. It's like, it's not either, man. It's work. And so, yeah, I want to talk about the fact that you're going to have to get in there and grind. And I have been fortunate since I was, I think, 27. I've made 7 figures since that. So I never expected, that was never in my mind that I would ever. I'm a simple kid from Montana, but when you build something that has scale, yeah, you can do pretty well financially, but there's some ugly stuff that goes along with it too if you're not careful.
What was the ugly stuff for you?
I mean, I was separated from my wife for almost a year. And I was almost 300 pounds at that point. Definitely, I was working late into the night, not because I had to, because I was avoiding going home. And it's really odd to say it now because my wife and I are, still together. It's almost 19 years now. We have 2 amazing boys. But the truth was we had lost one another and communication well into, I guess that would have been my second company at the time. And I didn't realize it. It's funny how when you look back, you're like, well, no kidding. You're a disaster, man. You're drinking way too much, and you're pouring everything you have into the business, but you're not watering your relationship, and you are not being the dad that you'd set out to be. And I say that because it's amazing how fast it happened, because I worked as hard as I did for my family, quote unquote. But the truth was I had lost that sight, and I had become so consumed with just the business side, I forgot to make sure to take care of what was most important. And the craziest part about that, Lisa, is it ended up being so much harder to grow that way. When I finally opened my eyes, I guess it would have been 2011 was really when the eye-opening happened. We grew even faster. I spent less time at work, and it's just by being myself, getting back to who I am. So anyway, yeah, it's funny. People on the outside are like, oh yeah, you're making this money, blah, blah, blah. That's not the whole story in anybody. And we've seen it time and time again. And that was certainly the case for myself.
Yeah. I'm grateful to have you on this show for so many reasons. One is that we women and men in business need role models, and we have the ability to model success. Women right now, we own less than 15% of the world's wealth. So there's a minority of women who are really winning in business, making 7 figures, women executives. We have more women running Fortune 500 companies today, now more than ever. And there's still this huge gap. So men are the leaders in business. You're the leaders in business. What are some of those lessons to extract from the work that you were putting in, the money that you were making? Can you pinpoint now what attributed to the spiral? Were there beliefs in there about success? What were you learning about yourself?
Yeah, it's a big question. So here's what I would start with. The people you surround yourself with, you've heard this many times, it will be a direct reflection of who you are. Now, my business partner at the time, he's a great guy, but he was on marriage 2, had another one, and he was working on number 4 as I sold the last company with him. And my point to that is that I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It doesn't make him a bad person, but a lot of what I was surrounding myself with, some of the values that started to bleed into my relationship. Now, that's all on me. So I'm not pointing any fingers at him. It's not on him at all. But I guess what I would say is I had lost that perspective of having a healthy marriage. So both of my parents were married for almost 50 some odd years before my dad passed. Both my grandparents were married over 60 years. The crazy thing is my parents made it look so freaking easy. And it was like, oh yeah, marriage is easy. No, dude, it's not. And my wife came from a totally different, an Asian background where they yell at each other all the time. Well, so we're having an argument and I'm thinking World War III's happening. To her, it's just a Tuesday. It's no big deal. And so I don't know if that applies to the lessons that you're asking for specific to business. But what I would say is and it's fascinating what you said, 15% of the world's wealth. What's really interesting about that to me is I think the lens that females bring into so many businesses is missing. Like, for instance, we used to call it male, pale, and stale in the financial service world because it was all middle-aged white guys looking like me. And it's like, okay, cool, but you're lacking really, if you look at the world, that's not the way the world looks. Mm-hmm. And so injecting really that female lens or a different, whatever demographic it is that's different than just, some kid that grew up in Montana, some other white guy that grew up in California. It's like, injecting different perspectives, I think, is so important. And now it's funny because I'm surrounded by females. They run my company all the way through. Like, I try to get the heck out of the way, do my content, and let them kill it. So anyway, I got off track a bit, but I would say that's fascinating. And I would also say, females so often have that sacrifice so much more than a male because of typically having children. Yeah. And so that decision is made like, well, I guess I'm going to be a mom, and trying to do both. There's so much stigma. I see it in my neighborhood today. Like, my wife, she doesn't work right now, and there's a stigma if she does, and there's a stigma if she doesn't. It's just weird, man. I'm like, she's so gifted at whatever she chooses to do, and she actually operates at a higher level when she's working. So she's starting her own business and has a nonprofit. But anyway, did that answer your question? I kind of went off the rails.
I think it was super valuable, and thank you for championing women in business. I think that's important too. And the finance industry, let's be real, it still is stale and pale.
It is, man.
A lot of room. We have a lot of room to grow in diversifying the financial services industry. When you say you had unbearable pressure at work, or maybe you're talking to the person that you're coaching today that they're facing, male or female, unbearable pressure at work. I can relate to that. I know in 2011 is when I left my first career to stay home and take care of my son. And that unbearable pressure for me was, I have a 3-year-old and I have a full-time job, and I'm not able to do both well. And it was my job. My ex-husband was burning the candle at both ends in food and beverage. And a lot of women, we end up falling on the sword to stay home, because that's, for me, that was the belief. I had a stay-at-home mom. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. Her mom was a stay-at-home mom. That's what you do. You stay home and take care of the kids. And I was so unhappy. I was so unhappy at home, although I loved my son so much. I was like, there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way to win in business for me, and also win as a parent. And so you've been married 19 years. For you, your kids were young, I'm guessing, when this spiral happened?
Yeah.
Was she raising the kids at home and you were working full time?
Yeah, that was actually a big part of the disconnect that she and I had, because her only real interaction were either play dates but it was all kids. The other thing that would happen is I lived really close. So people hate having a commute, but my commute was like 5 minutes. So I would go from business through the front door, kid being thrown into my arms with no decompression time to be like, all right, let's take work, leave it there, and come home. And I know that's like, it sounds like, okay, dude, no sympathy needed because she busted her ass all day. But the truth was, she wasn't getting what she needed, that adult interaction, that stimulation. Because my wife she's really a go-getter. And it is fascinating to see some people are just wired. So my sister, for instance, brilliant, got like 35 out of 36 on her ACTs. She should be running a Fortune 500 if she wanted to, but it's not her path. Mm-hmm. Her path was to be a stay-at-home mom, and she thrives in that. She loves it. My wife, not real maternal, and if she was here, she would say the same, but chose to stay home to sacrifice for my career to allow me to do that. And it was one of the worst decisions we made. So when we started getting back together after being separated for a year, that was one of the non-negotiables is, hey, it's not a financial thing. It's you need that. Let's get you going back into the professional workforce, because so much of her identity was lost when she just became the stay-at-home mom. And I don't mean that I think it's one of the toughest jobs.
It is.
But she needed that charge from work. So anyway, we figured out that when she's active in the workforce, it was better for our relationship. Yeah. It was better for her as a mom. And so everybody started actually living their best lives because she's happy. She's happy coming home. I'm happier that she's happy. And so the whole thing just started getting better. But it's, it took us a while to figure that one out.
What was the wake-up call for you?
Well, being away from my kids, looking in the mirror and not, I mean, look, I played basketball in college. I'm a very active guy, and looking in the mirror at almost 300 pounds, that was not cool. It was just one of those things where it's like, what happened? Because it wasn't like I was going out and trying to sabotage, but I was doing a hell of a good job doing it. Like, my relationship sucked. I now have my kids 50% of the time. And for some people, that's great. For me, everything rises and sets. Like, my son is going to college next year. That's going to be a tough day. Like, JM may be, well, not maybe. It's going to be really, really hard to let my boy go. But anyway, I think that was the wake up call where it was like, I'm losing my family. I'm losing everything that I wanted. Because if you ask me at 5 years old, what I wanted to be a dad. And now I'm only going to be able to be a dad half the time with my kids. That, for some people, that's okay. And I've seen that, but for me, it just didn't work.
No, that was the hardest thing. I'll never forget the drive. The first week I went through a divorce in 2017, the first drive, dropping my kid off at school, knowing that I wasn't going to see him for 5 days. And it literally felt like someone's ripping my heart out of my chest. It was the hardest thing. And I know that I stayed in that marriage a lot longer than I should have. So different, you and I have different stories in that way. But for me, it was like, I can't stay in this relationship, but how am I supposed to leave my son? And it was so conflicting and so opposed to who I was as a mom. That was the hardest decision I ever had to make.
Now, I would imagine what you did. I just, again, I don't know. But the time that you did get with him, I bet you your quality of time spent was so much greater. Yeah. And that is the one thing that I was fortunate my kids were young because, I was that guy coming home with this, it was, I think, a BlackBerry at the time, but, the cell phone, doing emails while the kids are there with the TV on. It was like, that's not quality time. I was around them, but I wasn't really engaged. And the one thing I will say about folks that I've seen that don't get their kids 100% of the time, when they do get them, their level of being engaged and truly present, I think that's one of the gifts that is given to folks. And I don't mean to put that in your mouth if that's what happened for you, but that's what I've observed is, it was a wake up call for me to be more present 100% of the time when I'm with them. But if I wasn't with them, I was definitely going to do that.
Yeah, it was for me very, very intentional. I'm going to soak up every minute that I have with this person. And it got me, I was in my 30s, mid 30s. It got me very clear about what was really important in life. And to this day, it's that, my kids and my business. That's it. And my husband. Right. So thank you for sharing that. That is a huge wake up call. And I think that's a big lesson. And I think that women, we're realizing that we can't do it all. And we don't want to do it all. And for us to win, women and men, everybody, we all need to be in this conversation together because this is a good segue to the suffering. There are men today, right here, right now, suffering. And my husband and I had this conversation. It was a short engagement or a short conversation yesterday at breakfast. And I said, men, my experience right now is that men are really hurting. And we're seeing that by the suicide rates of CEOs. We're seeing that by suicide rates of men. And we're also seeing that by suicide rates in young men. I think it's 4 times, I have a statistic here, 4 times the amount of men commit suicide than women.
So I don't know if you know this, but a year and a half ago, that's how I lost my dad.
I didn't.
Now, my dad and I were the closest you can be as a father-son. The hardest part being a mindset coach is that I had no idea. To your point of men are suffering, and that my dad's generation, you didn't burden people with your problems. You don't talk about it. It's why in my first book, I started with vulnerability, because it's the most profound leadership lesson that I have learned in my professional career. Now, I was taught boys don't cry. That's the lesson I was taught. And it's a terrible advice, by the way. It's absolutely terrible. And there's, again, a stigma that if you cry, you're weak. That's bullshit. Sorry, it's baloney.
You can say bullshit on my show. You absolutely
yes.
can. Yeah.
But no, it is. It's absolute nonsense. And so that's one of the things that I'm passionate about, because I don't want any family to go through what my family has gone through and still going through.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, my dad was the kindest, warmest, strongest. I mean, 6'6", 280. This man was a freaking rock, and yet suffered in silence. And it's one of those things where it doesn't have to be that way. And you were talking earlier about, especially for females, trying to be a mom and have the business. And the one word that I think came out of the pandemic for me was grace. Mm-hmm. If everyone could give themselves a little grace and truly put down all their walls, take off the masks, that's when you can flourish. Because the truth is, you don't have to do it all, and you can't do it all. And it's interesting. All my female clients, I ask the first question when they come by, I say, what did you do for yourself today? And they list off the car, the house, the dog, the husband, the kids. I mean, the list goes, it's a litany. And I said, I asked you, what did you do for you today? And they can't come up with the answer. And so that's literally where we start the coaching session, because I'm a firm believer that you cannot lead anyone else until you lead yourself. And so taking care of the mind, body, and soul, that's what I coach on for anybody, whether you're male or female. Make sure that you're taking care of you first so that you can take care of everyone else. So anyway, it's a big subject, and it's unfortunate, you're right, how much people are suffering and not willing to put themselves out there and say, I need help.
I need help. And we get to take personal responsibility for the lives that we lead. I know that you believe that too. And something my husband said yesterday, he said, Lisa, no one gives a shit about men. Mm-hmm. And that really landed heavy on my heart, because being someone who's championing women to win, and statistically, there's so much information out there in the financial services industry all across the map and all across the world of how women are behind. And it clicked that just as much as we need to be championing women, we can't afford for men to feel like that they don't matter. Do you have, what are your thoughts about that statement about no one gives a shit about men? We're just here to work. We're just here to work, go to work, take care of people. That's like a ton of pressure, right?
Yeah, I think it's a deep-seated belief that we have. I actually don't know. It's interesting, because I love that you're championing women's in the workforce, women in general, right? However, you know how often I've seen women cut other women down? I see it all the time, and I don't understand it. So it's hard for me to say that, women are being supported and everybody's like, kumbaya, when the truth is, I think so many people are so self-induced and just focused on themselves that they forget to actually give a shit about someone else. Yeah. And when you do put that love out there, whether you're a male or a female, you're going to get that love back reciprocally 100, 1,000 times, but it's just not happening that often, in my opinion. And it is interesting because, if I go, let's say I met your husband and somehow we met at watching football, we're at a business event. Well, it's not like men are going to go, hey man, tell me your deepest, darkest fears. And he's just going to open up. It doesn't happen. And so I think the reason that females feel supported more is because they're willing to have that conversation more often than men. Mm-hmm. typically men are like, no, everything's good. I'm fine, which fine means no, you're not. You're actually, you're hurting, and that's okay. So I don't know. I don't know because I'm not a female. I can't say that you're supported more than males. I will say until men are willing to really put themselves out there and say, here I am, here's my heart, here, like wide open, you're probably not going to get anything back. And there are some amazing communities that you can plug into that are shedding some of these generational, like the baggage. But it's not easy to find.
It's not. It's out there though, like you said. What are your thoughts for a woman, a friend of mine, someone that's listening to this show right now? How can she best support her husband? Because it can't just be the other way around, right? It can't just be that the man's supporting the woman. What can she do to best support her husband?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is sitting down and saying, what do you really want? Not what you're doing for a job, not what, like what are your dreams and passions, and are you pursuing those? And by the way, that should be going both ways. Obviously you need to provide for your family, whether you're the male or the female, and hopefully it's a team effort, right? My wife and I, we're teammates, man. And if she happens to be staying home, cool. But actually having that conversation, like, are you truly passionate about what you're doing? Do you love what you're doing? And I know some people like, that's BS and you can't love what you do. I think you're wrong. I think you absolutely can love what you do if you're willing to put yourself out there. I think people are they're so used to saying, I have to. Well, you don't have to do anything other than drink water, eat food, have some shelter. Like, these are the only have tos in the world. You get to pursue whatever your dreams are. You get to go to the job. Now, if your job sucks, you get to choose to not go there anymore, or you get to continue to suffer. So yeah. I think, to answer your question directly, having those real conversations to say, not just how you doing, good morning, I love you. It's like, how are you doing? Are you really chasing what you're passionate about? Because the challenge is, if he, in this case, is going to work every single day and hating it, he's going to be bringing that stuff home too. Yeah. And it's going to affect the relationship. It's just the way it works.
It's an inside job first. I think you and I are both aligned there. And then also making sure that we're both okay. And that we're not just, because my husband and I are both high achievers. We'll just push. Having the ability to sit down and go, okay, what's really going on? And I do care about you. I know one thing that I do very intentionally with my husband is I look at him in the eyes and say, I appreciate everything you do for our family. And you matter.
It's the number one thing why people aren't happy at work right now, is because exactly what you said, appreciation. I call it EPR, encourage, praise, and recognize. You're doing that by saying, I see you, I appreciate you, and I just want you to know you matter to me. How many people get to hear that on a daily basis? Not many. No. And so I think it's amazing what you're doing. And I'm sure your husband feels like, king of the world every morning when you say that. And of course he's going to go deal with all the nonsense, whatever the day's going to bring him. But if you started it off that way, oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So couple tips for ladies out there. Appreciate your man. It's not weak. It's the opposite. That's a strength to say, I love you. I'm here for you. You're the best. And I think that's the vulnerability that's missing in a lot of relationships, because that's scary. That's the scary stuff.
Well, I tell my kids all the time when my boys are fighting, I'm like, look, guys, the world outside is going to kick your ass nonstop. So in my house, no. We support one another. There's enough out in the world that's going to tell you you're not worthy, you're not strong enough, you're not. And my boys have said the same mantra every single day of their life. So they're really conditioned to say these things. But I'm like, guys, I don't care that you're fighting. I care that you support one another, because you're family, man. This is your guy. The world's going to kick him down. You're there to pick him up. So that goes for relationships and for kids and all that.
For money too, right? So this is a financially focused show. Typically, we talk a lot about money, but you can't talk about money if you're not talking about relationships. I think it's all intertwined. But with money, it's also really important to have open, honest, vulnerable conversations. And a lot of the experts that I talk to, even though like one of my best friends were experts, realizing that it's important to have those conversations at home too. Your kids, we get to have open, honest, vulnerable conversations about money just as much as we do about other things. How are you and Lisa handling that in the household with the boys? They're just like, they're getting older, right?
Yeah. So we've been really open talking about money because my relationship with money was really, really not very good. Because when I was a kid, we'd drive by the country club and my dad said, "Oh, there's the pretty people." And some reason being a pretty person was a bad thing. I don't know why, but you know, there was this negative connotation. So the first time I hit the $1 million mark in a year, I felt terrible. I literally came home and I remember it. And I was talking to Lisa, and Lisa's my wife as well.
Yeah.
And she said, "What are you talking about?" She didn't understand that I had all of these self-limiting beliefs around money. And so, because she grew up in a very much more affluent, upbringing, abundance of money was more prevalent to her than I. And so, one of the things that we wanted to absolutely shatter for our kids is we are not going to, or we're going to do our best not to heap that on them, because, and my youngest has an abundance mindset. Like the dude's going to either crush it or he's going to be bumming off his brother for the rest of his life. I'm not sure. But you know, he believes he started running his own business at like 7, and he's just that entrepreneur. And he's actually much better with money still today than I am in terms of he sees how to grow it. And it's really, really cool because I learned from my son all the time. He talks to me about business. He's like, "What about this, Dad?" And I'm like, "Dude, I can't wait till you can come run this right now, dude, because you are on it." So anyway, we are very open talking about money. We don't talk in terms of scarcity. We talk in terms of abundance. We talk in terms of, being financially responsible, but also the fact that you can create whatever you believe you can.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so important, instilling that mindset at a young age. It matters more than people think or people realize. Let's talk about your word of the year. So I saw on Instagram that your mantra of the year is speaking your truth. Have you not always spoken your truth, or have you noticed that you've been holding yourself back? Where did that come from?
Yeah. So every year I choose something where I feel like, okay, I can do better. So I'm pretty brutally honest. My wife would be like, "This is a terrible mantra, James. You already speak exactly how you feel." But there are times that I would go along to get along, and I would just sit back and I think what I've really learned is, look, just because it's my truth doesn't mean it's yours. And it doesn't mean I'm right and that you're wrong. It's just I'm not going to hold back on how I feel. So for instance, we're in this crazy political year and we have the presidency coming. So often people would say something and I would just kind of, okay. But instead of saying, "That's an interesting point, I completely disagree with you, here's my thoughts," I would just be like, "Oh, okay." And then later I would either, talk about it with my wife. And I was like, "Wait a minute, I don't like that. I don't ever want to talk behind someone's back. If I'm ever going to feel a certain way, you're just going to know, because that's all I really have is my word. That's my integrity." Yeah. And so I just felt like, you know what? I can do a better job of that. Last year, if I were to go back, it was really setting proper boundaries, because we had this really toxic group of friends is what it ended up being, that didn't support. They talked shit behind each other's backs. And I found myself starting to get into that. And I was like, "What are you doing? Stop." And so I completely set up strong boundaries. Did it take away a lot of social gatherings? It sure did. But it led me to the awareness, like, hey, man, just make sure that you're speaking your truth. Don't hurt anyone's feelings. That's not my intention at all. But I want people to know, like, this is my truth and I'm passionate about that. It doesn't mean that it's right. So we're clear. It's just my truth.
Yeah. I mean, how could it be wrong if it's your truth? It's all how people perceive it, right? Your truth is your truth. An opinion is what it is. People are going to take it how they take it. I love that, though. I think that we need more of that. We need more people to stand up and speak their truth. And after all, that's the only thing that's ever changed the course of history, is people standing up and speaking their truth for the and for the betterment of the world, for the betterment of the society. With good-hearted people, how can you go wrong if you're speaking your truth, right?
Well, it is interesting. I love hearing it from somebody else saying that, because I say to my kids all the time, your feelings are just, they're yours. No one can tell you they're wrong, right? It doesn't matter. No one can ever tell you that your feelings are wrong. They're going to, but they're your feelings. And, you know, there's so much out there in the world right now that's not super positive. And it's like for instance, the Sound of Freedom, the movie. I remember wanting to do this really powerful video, and my guy's like, well, I don't know if we really want to do that because of blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this year, screw that, man. Like, I'm going to go ahead, and if you don't like it, we're just not going to be probably hanging out, because if you don't like the fact that this movie needs to come out, you're looking at the world in a way that I really don't want to. So anyway.
I love that you brought that up. We watched that movie with our kids, and financially focused, again, always bringing it back to money, is how much of those problems in the world would be solved if greed and certain types of money conversations weren't being had. It all revolves around money. And, you know, that's my opinion. I really do think that. I think that people and money and power, we have to look at that, the depths of that, and what's going on in our world today and in America today, to really discover in the underbelly what needs to be healed. What needs to be healed, so that we can fix these huge, massive problems that we have. That was a really good example in that movie of like, oh shit, it's easy to wake up. It's easy to just live your life and pretend like none of this exists. But that's not the answer.
It is one of those things. I don't know how many times you've said this, but follow the money. So if a decision doesn't make sense and you go follow the money, and then you're like, oh, I see why we're doing, I don't know, for instance, a pandemic. Pfizer is on everything. Follow the money. Why are we being pushed so hard for this thing? Why is this? And again, that's one of those really subjects that people were so up in arms about. It's like, look, to me, it didn't make a lot of sense. And if you followed the money, follow the networks, who's supporting that? Interesting. There's an agenda there. So I think it's one of those questions that we should always ask, is follow the money. What answer do you get when you follow it?
Right. Yeah. We could be here all day. This is definitely a wormhole that we could go down. And I know I'll be on your show, so maybe we can pick up this conversation when I'm on your show in next week, I think, even.
Love it. I love it.
Yeah. So I saw this quote I had posted on my Facebook page, and I think this is a good way for us to close out the show today. First of all, thanks for being here.
My pleasure. I love your interview style, by the way. So I think you crushed this. For those that listen to Lisa, she crushed it, man. Like, a really good host. But thanks for having me.
Should we fist bump it?
Yeah, right there.
So, okay. I'm just going to say it. I saw this post, and I had posted on my Facebook page that you're going to fail more than you succeed. Agree or disagree?
1,000%. I fail. I am awesome at failing on a daily basis. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things that people don't, it's become cliche, like, you know, you got to get up, but that's true. The only people I guarantee that are going to succeed in this world are the people that don't quit. Somebody asked me, why are you successful? And I was like, well, I don't know what success is for you, but thank you for the compliment. It's because I literally don't know how to quit. I will keep getting up and up and up and up and up again and getting my teeth kicked in. I don't know where it came from. I can't say that I was taught it. My mom will tell you, she's in my kitchen right now working on something. The kid he wasn't that talented. He just kept going. So 1,000%, you are going to fail far more than you're going to succeed. But if you can see it through and just not quit, you're going to be successful.
I think that's true. And I think financially, it's easy to get short-sighted, and it's easy to, and, you know, in personal finance specifically, you can see that certain things are you're losing the game or something's a failure or you screwed up. And I'm really on the Dave Ramsey train right now about like language and the way that we talk to ourselves. And so I love that. Like, just keep going. Just keep going. If you have a goal or a vision or a dream. And I know for me, that's what separates me from the pack, is that I just wake up every day committed to winning, whatever that looks like for me that day, but we're going to fail. That's part of it.
That's true. Let's Go Win is the name of my company, obviously. And people are like, so it's all about wins and losses. I'm like, no, it's all about setting yourself up to win every single day. That doesn't mean you're going to win every day. I promise you, I'd lose all the time, but I'm going to get up and I'm going to do it again the next day. And I'm going to do it I'm going to put myself in that very best position to win. And the other thing is, give yourself some grace. I said that earlier, but you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make financial I have some stories of buying the dumbest shit at the wrong age, and none of it made sense. Yeah. And guess what? That was a great learning lesson. And I'm so glad that I went through it. Did it cost me a ton of money? Yeah. A ton of heartache? Yes. But guess what? Now maybe my kids don't have to go through that same mistake that I did. So anyway, yeah, I love that quote, by the way.
Awesome. Okay. A few more questions. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite word?
Oh, freedom.
Love that. What's your favorite swear word?
It's gotta be fuck. I say it way more than I should, but it's always combined with something like fucking A or motherfucker. It's always that. And the problem, if my mom, she's probably like, gosh, stop it. I'm going to clean your mouth out with soap, you dirty boy.
Yeah, I think that's mine too. Same thing. My parents get the same reaction with me. Okay, last question. What do you want to be your legacy?
Yeah, it's a big one. You know what I want? I want my people that I influence to feel like I really, really gave everything to them. I gave them everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I talk about this often. Legacy is one of those words that I've spent a lot of time on because I didn't really understand it. But I would just say that I gave everything that I had. I was authentically and unapologetically me, and that they felt love when they were around me.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so we said people can find you on your website, which is letsgowin.com.
Mm-hmm.
And Instagram, what's your handle?
Let's Go Win 365, and that's probably where I'm getting the most traction and a lot of interaction. And then the Let's Go Win podcast, because like you said, you're going to be on it, and it's a freaking great show. You're going to be an awesome guest, so yeah, check it out.
Check us out. Check it out. Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks for being on today, JM.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.